Welcome to this, I think it's the second panel for the track A of the Streaming Summit. And in this panel, we'll talk about live streaming and the workflow for live streaming and the challenges for live streaming. My name is Magnus Svensson. I'll be the moderator for this panel. I'm based in Stockholm, Sweden, normally, working for a company called Ivin Technology. We're independent streaming experts helping the industry with knowledge and experience with the streaming. And we'll be working a lot with live streaming and the challenges. So I think I will be able to ask the right questions to these guys next to me. So I thought we'd start off with each of the panelists will present themselves, a little bit of their background and what they're working with, and then we'll hit off. So let's start with Pierre-Louis sitting next to me.
Thank you, Magnus. Thanks everyone for being here today. Quick background of myself. I am a VP product for CDN and Vivix services at Lumen Technology. So if you don't know Lumen, there's been many versions of that company from Level 3, CenturyLink, and now Lumen since last year when we rebranded the company. Prior to that, I joined Lumen as part of the acquisition of a company I funded 7 years ago, which was StreamRoot, which was basically peer-assisted video delivery technology. So a lot of things around live streaming as well. Related to that type of technology. So that's about me.
Thank you. And Michael?
Hey, my name is Michael Fay. By way of pedigree, I started Level 3 CDN business. Prior to that, I sold my company to Akamai Technologies in 2006, started Level 3 CDN business, then moved to Akamai Technologies where I ran their media and entertainment division, and then left the vendor side of CDNs to start Disney+. And currently, I'm responsible for Disney+, Hulu, Star, Star+, ESPN Plus's online CDN and distribution strategy on their senior technology team.
So what do you do the rest of the time?
I have other jobs. Yeah, that's a great question. We should talk about that offline.
And finally, Imran.
I'm Imran Maskatia at Ivaka TV. We're a startup that has a hybrid broadcast and broadband TV delivery service. We've rolled out in 5 markets across the country: Boise, Phoenix, Denver, Colorado Springs, and Twin Falls, Idaho, with more to come. Before that, I ran engineering at a company called Uyala. And before that, started a streaming service called Redbox Instant by Verizon, which was a joint venture between Redbox and Verizon.
Thank you. As you're here, we have a great panel. We have all the experience that we can think of, so let's kickstart this. When we preparation, we discussed and we immediately came in on the differences between real live and linear, and the race of linear TV versus live TV and differences there. So maybe, Michael, maybe if you can introduce to the differences and how the division of these type of services are.
Yeah, so I was thinking about the question. I have, for the audience to try and give you guys some material information that I think is helpful as you take something back from it. I'm going to throw some bit rates out to you to give you some idea of how large average bit rates are with Hulu live versus on demand versus Star versus Disney+, to just give you some idea as to how big or the quality of our streams. You can use the adaptive bit rate to maybe figure out our quality or at least use it as a benchmark for how we're doing. There's some interesting statistics in here, and then we can talk a little bit about live versus linear. So just, if you have a chance, write these down. They're interesting. And so Hulu's live adaptive bit rate is 6.9 megabits average. It's only available in North America, so these are all North American numbers. The VOD for Hulu is 5.6. So our live content broadcasts at a much higher quality than our on-demand content for Hulu. For Star+, which is available internationally, but I use that as an ESPN proxy, the VOD is 9.8 megabits per second, and the live content is 6.8. Completely inverse of what Hulu is. And then our theatrical content at Disney+, the average bit rate is 12.8 megabits, a real quality theatrical experience. I think the reason I share that with you is because the rules for us are changing. And we don't have a rule of thumb for how we treat live versus how we treat on-demand per se. And you saw there that the metrics are live on one service is a higher bit rate than our live on another service versus our on-demand on the same service. So we're all over the road when it comes to how we're quickly adapting to the quality for live versus on-demand on our service. And I think that that speaks to the challenges of what the future of live and linear is going to look like. When we produce a UFC event, for example, a pay-per-view event on ESPN, we stand up an entirely new and unique workflow, and we set the bit rates for that particular event based on what we think the quality of the stream needs to be. My point is, when it comes to live versus on-demand, when it comes to a myriad of products, premier products in the industry, nothing is set in stone. We're still trying a variety of different things to figure out what is the right answer for our subscribers. That includes live, that includes linear, and that includes video on demand. Nothing is prescriptive, nothing is set in stone or automated to the point where the UFC event next month is going to inherit any of the sins of the UFC event from this month. We're willing to rewrite the book when it comes to live and linear and figure out what's working. So even a mature brand like Disney Plus is still figuring it out.
So why do you have these differences? And is that due to the content, type of content, or the coding efficiency, or are you trying different versions, or?
I think that I'll let you guys chime in as well. I think that the market is moving pretty quickly, and we're still finding things out. I mean, I'm probably a 20-year veteran in the streaming space, and I still get ridiculous requests come across my desk. Dancing with the Stars is an ABC production. This year, Dancing with the Stars is in its 15th year, 30th season, is not going to be available on ABC. It's going to be available on Disney Plus. You know what our average bit rate is going to be for that? I don't know either. We'll figure it out as it gets a lot closer. So, I mean, we're just trying to be as flexible as we can be.
So, Pierre-Louis, what's your experience when it comes to delivering live versus on demand?
Well, I think it's been a very interesting journey over the past 5 years, not even going back there. We've seen the acceleration of a lot of live events at a smaller scale as well during the pandemic, because a lot of people, small businesses, fitness, churches, I mean, we've seen all kinds of use cases that went online. So you gotta manage this like small to medium audience live streaming. They need to pop up and pop down. So you really need to have like easy configuration. You cannot have like, it's definitely not like the UFC type of delivery. So that's been, I think, accelerated along with people keep on streaming their life more and more live. And at the same time, we've seen kind of the continuous track of bigger and larger high quality events, okay, where you have like millions of users and where you really need to set up like a whole environment, a whole support in place because this is an event that cannot crash. We usually in that type of use case as well in a multi-CDN environment. I think now it's not even a question. When you have like a very large event, a very live event, is like, is it sports or political, or it's something that you have to do. Many ways of doing that as well. There's not one book for doing multi-CDN strategies. So I think it's been really interesting from, again, being able to be more adaptive and more like self-service oriented when you have these guys that need to pop up, pop down events, and keep on building the scalability and the performance and the reliability for these millions of users events like the Super Bowl and others that cannot just fail.
Do you see the same variation of bit rates that Michael mentioned, or do you see that the big events are taking higher bit rates now because of the quality delivered? Or?
Yeah, it's really across the board, and if you take like international variation, it's going to be even more wild because obviously ISP connections are not at the same level in every countries. But yeah, I mean, for sure, it depends also on like your encoding strategy. That's going to have an impact on the bitrate that you're able to push, the type of devices you want to reach out to. Is it like big screen, big event, or are you mostly targeting people that's going to be on their phone? That's going to have a big impact as well. So, I mean, for us, it's for just from the pure CDN perspective, obviously as the bit rates are increasing, it puts more and more pressure on the capacity of the network, right? Because if you going at 12 megabit per second, that is completely different than being at 6, right? It's a 2x factor. So if you have a million user, well, it's a lot of terabits that you have to bring in the network. So that's just like keep on pushing us to go further and further on just increasing our capacity, improving our efficiency, deploying more and more like distributed nodes. And I think for live event, one thing that was not real 5 years ago is now that you have events that are exclusively available online. And I think this was not the case at all in many countries. I'm French, so like there's many areas in Europe now that you can only watch like the local football league on some of the streaming provider. It's not available on TV. Amazon has been well known for buying rights for NFL that's going to be only available online tomorrow, next season. So that's a big challenge, right? Because suddenly you're talking about real broadcast size audience. It's not like the 20% of the people that's going to watch it online. It's the entire people. And again, it cannot fail because people is going to be, and it has to be available in every locations, even if you're like in a remote part of the country. So that's very challenging. And that's very new. It wasn't the case. Even I think last NAB, I don't recall there's many big rights that was only available online.
Yeah. And Imran, your experience when it comes to Evoca is a bit different because you're mixing traditional broadcast with OTT delivery. So.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we say traditional broadcast, but I think our broadcast is anything but traditional. We're using the next gen ATSC 3.0 standard, which allows us to unify our production pipeline and our transcoding pipeline and just have deliver the exact same stream to broadcast and to our CDN. And that allows us to do some very interesting things on the set-top box that allows, for example, we can switch back and forth between streaming and broadcast without the user seeing any difference. From a bitrate perspective, we've seen a lot of efficiency out of HEVC. So we've standardized on HEVC across the board. We're looking to future codecs as well. But we can get very good quality out of a 3.5 megabit stream for 1080p for our sports streams. And we've been broadcasting in 4K. And the 4K experience is actually really clean on broadcast. And I think one of the benefits of broadcast is you don't have to have the entire backhaul support terabits and terabits of throughput in order to get a 4K stream to households.
Interesting. I think one touch point that we discussed as well is the why do we see the shift of we had a shift a couple of years ago where everybody went online when Netflix introduced on demand, and now suddenly we're starting, I would say, see the shift of being back to a little bit or more lean back linear viewing again. Live or recorded live is still a linear viewing. What's your take on this, Michael?
How many people in the audience still watch live content on either an OTT or direct-to-consumer product live? How many people watch live? Here's my personal story. Sometimes I just get on-demand fatigue and I just want to be fed whatever's up next. I mean, that's really my decision-making. Hey, what's on after this? And I'll watch it because it's live. I thought live would be dead by now. To be transparent with you guys, Hulu's live, maybe 1/5 of the viewing on Hulu is live, and it's growing. And it's been growing since this last Super Bowl. I don't know. I don't claim to understand it. But live does not want to die. And everyone will say the same thing. Outside of breaking news and sports, which are the premier use case for live, I really don't understand why. So we keep a healthy infrastructure of live capabilities. Live's not dead. People still want to watch live. On demand is growing as well. Everything's growing, but it's interesting to see how much live is growing. It's not dying. So much so that Disney Plus, as I mentioned with Dancing with the Stars, Disney Plus is offering a live portfolio. We've done some live testing. We plan on doing some more stuff in live. It's interesting. People seem to still want to be given a content schedule, and we're watching it closely. But we are forecasting more growth in live.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had that same feeling that linear live TV will be dead, and it's very much alive, and it will continue to be very much alive. And I find myself on the Friday evening turning on the TV. I want to be entertained. I want to have a curated stream of TV. So I think that is the behavior that we're coming back to. Curation is probably the reason for watching I call it a playlist.
It's interesting. It's like that the Monty Python sketch, right? Not dead yet. And it's you can tell that, you know, exactly as you're mentioning, you want to sit down on the couch and just turn something on, and it may not matter whether it's, you know, Bad Boys 2 and I've seen it 100 times and I'm starting right in the middle of it, but it's a movie I like and I'll watch it for the next 20 minutes until I have to do something else. And I don't want to take 15 minutes to figure out what to watch.
No. Do you see any differences regionally? You have, as a global CDN, is it a European, US thing, or is it a global?
No, live is still growing, and we've seen some interesting innovation in that field as well. Like you've seen like kind of semi-automated live linear channels that just like take a variety of content that you have and it's going to create a linear channel, because it's basically a book of VOD file that you're just pushing and having one episode after another. And this type of use case has been skyrocketing and very surprising. Like, would you imagine like people want to binge watching just randomly and coming up in the middle of an episode and just watch 5 episodes in a row of Friends or whatever? So it is very very interesting to see this type of innovations and that it's getting adoptions for sure. So yeah, linear is not dead, and I think I agree. Like sometimes the VOD fatigue is probably one of the main reasons why people are just want to have, okay, what's the content available now? I just want to chill out on my sofa. But I think we're going to see more innovation there. I really like this like kind of we'll see, I think, more targeted automated live linear channel. It's like now it's kind of thematic. So you have like, I don't know, if you like sports, you will have a bunch of like very famous games, or if you like one show, you're gonna have like all these shows in a row. But as these platforms or as these people are gonna learn more about us, they're gonna package the content that we really love, and we don't even have to spend half an hour picking on the platform what we want to watch. So.
We talked also about the increase of engagement time and live events and building something around the live event to keep the viewers in your service or in your app after and before the event. Is that something that should be more focused on? In Europe, we have some terrible examples where basically after a game you get a slate saying that the game has ended. And that basically tells the user or the viewer to leave the service. So what's your take on that?
So, you know, we've focused a lot on sports at Evoca, and one of the things that we've seen is that it's not just the actual game itself that people are interested in, but there's the pre-game show and the post-game show and all of the shoulder content in between. So our content partners have a lot of this really good content that the super fans, that the people who are really interested in their sports teams will want to consume, whether it's linear or on demand. And I think it's absolutely right that the sports experience depends not just on the game itself. The other thing that we're seeing, and you know, we'll be doing some of this, but you can see other ESPN and others doing some of this, is during the game experience itself, improving the quote-unquote interactivity of the program, whether it's stats, whether it's alternate camera angles, whether it's other things. I think it's really cool to see how experimental and innovative these things are. I've been doing this in a while, and a lot of times the cynic in me says that people just want to watch the game and not do anything else. But I think there is an audience for extra data during the game.
So how do you handle that at Disney and Michael? Is that something you work a lot with, trying to increase the engagement time? And
I mean, so engagement time is incredibly important. I mean, managing engagement time, growing subscribers, managing churn are key business indicators. We take that very seriously. Group watch, the idea that you would watch a Disney theatrical with somebody else in a social environment, and it's available. I mean, it works. I don't know. I think maybe it's the content type, and you're probably right on sports, and you're probably right on there's probably some ESPN channels that people want to get really invested in the data stream that runs alongside, or there's a live event that's happening here next weekend with the NFL draft, and I think that would be a great example of some sort of interactivity. So it's there. I think that there's probably, to use an expression that's being used a lot, it's probably a metaverse experience, like a content metaverse. I can see that developing. We take that pretty seriously. I think right now, while we have a pretty aggressive roadmap on content, live and on demand, and we have an aggressive roadmap on ad-supported technology, and I've already committed to doing more live and linear programming. I don't know. I think the jury's still out on the interoperability and converting that lean back experience to a lean forward experience for certain content profiles. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how people want to be entertained in 2024, but we do keep a very open mind and a very open system so that if we needed to add things to the service, we can in a very lightweight, quick, and flexible manner. One challenge that we have that a brand like Netflix doesn't have is we have live. Netflix doesn't have a live product. So we have a whole bunch of infrastructure that's sitting there saying, hey, what if we ran a data stream? So I don't know. The jury's still out on that one as well. But I would say that for content producers or technologists in the audience don't count anything as being dead, and keep a flexible and open framework so that if data integration with a particular live program for sports or breaking news needs to be incorporated, you're capable of doing that, and your service is able to do that. Jury's still out on whether people need to do that, but I don't know. It's hard to count anything out right now.
Yeah. But okay, the brief mentioned for this presentation or this panel was that we should talk about the challenges of live streaming. Are there challenges, or is it that simple? Michael?
It's easy.
Easy,
Yeah.
easy peasy.
It's easy. I'll say, it is complex. That's a platitude. Let me give a little bit of an example. When we launched the Star Plus brand, which is kind of like the Hulu with Hulu Live in Latin America. So think, for those that are North American, think Hulu in LATAM. I figured that the very first phone call that I was going to get from an executive would be, man, the latency on this thing. What, people are watching something on television, and it's 45 seconds behind. And so we ran it up the flagpole and said, how do we want to handle latency? And I'm just speaking specifically to a complex nature of a live production for scalable, very large, multi-million concurrent connection audiences. The decision that Disney made at that time was we will take higher quality over faster startup times or lower latency or ultra low latency streams. We would rather give the audience, in a football match, a soccer match, we would rather give the audience a crystal clear chyron or lower third than be within 3 seconds of the broadcast program over the air. We made that decision. Could we have made the other decision to add technology or run it on WebRTC and reduce the latency and give everybody the same within 3 or 4 seconds? Could we change the segment size? We chose to give a high quality experience because we find that our subscribers care more about having an awesome, high quality experience than they do about having a low latency experience, and that goes for breaking news, and that goes for sports. So it's complex, and there's a lot of places to make decisions to correct in one direction and make an incorrect decision in another direction. All has to be very thoughtful.
Yeah. And Pierre-Lee, you mentioned that the challenge with scale and small events like a church, maybe not a small event, but it could be a small church and up to the Super Bowls. And how I assume that you have challenges in both.
Well, there's many challenges, and I think I want to start by to explain a little bit the level of preparation that both content provider and CDNs put in this type of events. It takes really the granularity of the analysis of the capacity of each CDN, what's the peering languages ISP, in which region, and we're going down now to like tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 ISP. And really, there's like nothing that is getting putting aside when we're preparing that event. And to be honest, the main platforms really pushed us to the next level. We were kind of surprised at the beginning, and obviously we had to put like a lot of resources, and we now are able to turn around this analysis really fast to tell, well, Mr. Provider, you can use that much capacity with this tier 3 ISP in Brazil for the next event next week. And not only we do that, but now we're also working in collaboration with the Streaming Video Alliance, and where Lumen is one of the big contributors around making that much more and more automatic, and making sure that it's not just where we're sending an email or a spreadsheet with a handful of peering connectivity, but we can that in a almost real time, or at least with the right frequency of updates available for our customer via API. So really like the level of preparation before we getting into these events, I think changed because the scale changed dramatically between what we were doing 5 years ago or even 3 years ago and now. And that's been a very a big challenge, and really happy at the level we are right now. Another topic on the challenge is on the challenges for live, I think is latency, and I tend to agree with Michael. There's many different ways to approach latency, and you really need to think about, okay, what's really matter for your users, because pushing ultra low latency to a handful of millions of users is still very, very hard. And especially if you want to do that on a global manner, it's very complex. So is it really latency that you're looking at? Is it more like getting your stream in a synchronous manner? So do you want to have like all the streams in the different apps that are at the same level? Is it perhaps that is more interesting than having 2 or 3 seconds or even sub 1 second latency? So really think about it and test with your user. I think it's really the advice that I would give, because sometimes you're surprised. Like people, you have this article in the press that, well, people are not happy because you're 20 seconds behind, but does your users are really complaining at that? Are they really happy to have like the best user, the best bit rate, and like can see the granularity of the game? Is it what they really want to be interested in? And I think the last but not least piece that I wanted to mention is the scalability. Obviously, it's kind of related to the preparation, but I think we've seen a lot of still people kind of innovating in that field. It is hard for a CDN provider, no matter which one it is, to keep a big chunk of your capacity that is not used every day, just to handle the big spike, right? Because you gotta invest in that capacity, and you cannot just having it sitting around for the next Super Bowl that's going to push like tens and tens of terabits of traffic, or like an unpredicted event sometimes. So obviously, how do you mitigate that? Well, you mitigate that by using multiple CDNs. So there's not just one CDN that needs to have the whole extra capacity. We've seen some emerging technologies coming up. Open caching is an initiative that's kind of helped scaling the capacity by putting some of the CDN in the last mile network. There's still people looking at multicast technology, even though I'm not really a big fan of that type of architecture. And because I have my Streamwood hat, I have to talk about some peer-to-peer technology as well that has been developed, and that we've seen some increasing traction since the acquisition of Streamwood by Lumen. And this is really a technology that can leverage the last mile network and not only the CDN layer to scale your live streaming and have millions of people that can exchange traffic. So you reduce the load on the CDN and the ISP, and you enable this kind of automatic scaling as well. So it's still a challenge. Like people have been talking about like scaling CDN for 20 years. We kind of keep up, but we're not at the end of the road for sure. There's still going to be a lot of challenge to overcome.
I'll let Imran comment on the broadcast side very soon. I saw he was laughing. So, but I just want to comment on the latencies things. But because if you ask a viewer if they will pay extra to get a few seconds lower latency, or if they will pay extra to get better quality streams for 4K and HDR, I think we all know the answer. The viewers will pay for quality. Very, very few will pay for getting 5-10 seconds lower latency. These users are probably somewhere else doing live betting. So but that doesn't stop the industry from going down in latency. But it's
Sure.
So
Yeah.
Imran, comment on the broadcast side.
And I think it's for me, broadcast is less about latency, because every delivery mechanism has latency. It's just about how much latency, right? But for me, broadcast is really about when we talk about long tail content and the short head. It's that short head of content where if you're in Denver and you're watching the Rockies and everybody is watching it for opening, that first pitch, opening day, you want to have, if you're streaming it, you'll have thousands of households streaming the exact same copy of the exact same bits multiple times, one per household, right? Whereas in broadcast, you send it once over the radio waves and it's done. And so I think it's really not about broadcast or streaming. It's about broadcast and streaming, which is why I think it's really interesting that the streaming summit is at the National Association of Broadcasters conference, right? Because I think that sort of multi-mode model is really where the future is going to be.
Do you see any trends when it comes to latency, or you're quite early in your process when it comes to your service, but do you get any complaints more than the things we read about around Super Bowl? And
we don't get complaints on latency, honestly, and I also don't think it's because of broadcast. I don't think it has to be latency or quality. I think there's an art form, and every delivery mechanism is different. So I don't think it's a really simple equation, to the point that Michael was making earlier. But I think it's I think there's a happy middle ground where you can achieve both quality and less latency.
do you see any other challenges from your angle when it comes to the live streaming things? Or?
Oh, there's challenges every day, but I think from our point of view, it's we're consistently on the bleeding edge, and so that comes with its own set of challenges. Where some of the stuff we're doing hasn't been done before. Some of the stuff we're working with our vendor partners to implement for the first time, and so that is definitely challenging. I think broadcast as a whole has the opposite problem of streaming, where you don't have the back channel, right? So it's a little harder to get the feedback from your player and from streaming clients, right? And so we have to build that separately, but it's a good problem.
Pierre-Louis, you mentioned that you handled everything from some large events, Super Bowl events, but also the smaller events. And I picked on one thing you mentioned, a lot of manual things sitting with Excel sheets. Is that a challenge as well for the industry, these small events that still requires manual processes and manual people sitting, watching it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and if you go to the floor, I was surprised actually by the number of companies that are now offering more integrated solutions, more API driven, to really enable people that are not like heavy streaming engineers, but people that like kind of want to set up their stream and put it out there without going through some of the open platform like YouTube or others. They want to kind of keep their stream overall. So I think we had that end-to-end type of approach before. I think what has changed with the pandemic has been that now we are trying collectively to make that available for less techie savvy engineers that don't need to put like the pieces together. And it's been a challenge for us as well, because he has to be more self-service, he has to be like more self-provisioning, and this is why we spent quite some time over the past 6 months developing more self-service capabilities, because we want to enable our customer, and it's not only the small customers, sometimes even like the big streaming platform they have, or the big media company, they also have like this kind of tier 2, tier 3 events, and they would love to leverage some of this more like integrated solution. So it's been interesting. I think it's been interesting also in the preparation of the content before that, because you have like everything around like remote production that comes into play for even some of the smaller. So many tools about like self-service, automated, and I think the whole industry has to move there and make it simpler. Just make it simpler for the users to develop, because no one, when you have like a small operation, you don't want to have like 5 engineers putting together a streaming platform.
Hey, let me. I just want to jump in on that because I was thinking about what you were saying, and it just, again, it might be enlightening for the group. Tonight at midnight, we're launching Moon Knight Season 1, Episode 5. I think it's Episode 5. Is it Episode
5, but it's tomorrow night. Isn't it Wednesdays?
It's tonight into tomorrow.
Okay, cool.
And the amount of people that show up for that, the 35 people on the bridge, are, you're right, I'm wrong. Says a lot. No, he's right, I'm wrong. So the same amount of people on the bridge are the same amount of people that are on the UFC bridge, are the same amount of people that are doing the Super Bowl. You know, you would think, as I listen to you talk about automation and improving, and I'm going to tell you, man, it's the same thing. Whether it was at level 3 / CenturyLink / Lumen / Akamai / Disney, when you have a live event or when you have a premiere title in VOD, you bring all of your A game, you make automation and machine learning and artificial intelligence our total secondary priority. You take all of your A players and your varsity and you put them on the phone and they stare at glass and you make sure it goes successfully. I don't know, it's been a long time. That formula has never changed. I encourage everybody to drive automation, but automation for the sake of success doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Tomorrow night, there will be the same A players in the room at Disney staring at the same screens that will be delivering next year's Super Bowl, that delivered last year's Super Bowl, that are doing the UFC events. I mean, there is no I have not met the automation silver bullet in streaming. I've met the automation silver bullet in broadcast. And that also requires a lot of eyes on glass as well. But it does show, to your point, it does show that there's a differentiation between the maturity of the markets. Streaming after what, 40, 35 years, 25 years? So it's still a long time. I mean, TV's been around for 75 years, 85, 75, something like that. I'm just remarking on your point on automation.
I agree.
I mean,
I think for big events, there's no questions. For
even
like
small events. I mean, Moon Knight is not it's a great title if you haven't seen it, but it's not like, we probably could automate a lot of it and it would work fine. But nope, we don't take any chances on pushing content out there, and then someone wakes up 7 hours later and they're like, wow, is the link not working? Oh, that would never fly in our culture, period, end of story. Right. And I think that's why the Disney Plus product has been so successful, is because, and it is a zero fault tolerant environment, whether it be live or on demand. You know, you're a 65-year-old grandma with little Joey on your lap, and you press HOTS, and you want to watch with your grandson, it always works. And I mean, automation is important, but never for the sake of quality. Quality.
Yeah. So your problem will to scale these 8 guys so they can handle all the multiple events.
And they're out there, and some of them are in the audience here, and some of them are walking on the floor, and some of them are just graduating school, and you know, not enough of them are diverse, and we all need to fix that problem. I mean, there's such great opportunities. This is where the technology is heading. I think Disney Plus has been a great experience for me in the evolution of the art of the possible. You know, totally breaking down primetime viewing, 8 o'clock Thursday night with your family on the couch watching NBC, to watching fully on-demand programming whenever you want, whatever you want. I mean, we are a true testimony to the evolution of what's possible. It just takes a long time. So, I mean, kudos to everybody in the room for trying to make it happen.
Absolutely. And in the last few years, when Disney Plus launched and afterwards, we've mostly all been remote. And so that, I think, is a big shift in this industry, right? Because you would, you know, in previous times, you would have had a knock, right? And you'd all be sitting together in one room in the knock. Mm-hmm. And whereas, do you have a live knock now?
Yeah. A couple of them. Same exact reason. I mean, could it be automated? Absolutely. Could you do Moz score and watch the video go through the workflow? Absolutely. But we still have people just staring at it at the encoder, staring at it at the packager, staring at it at the origin, staring at it at the Meteor, staring at it on Lumen, Akamai, Fastly, CloudFront, staring at it at the client, staring at it at the client in New York, staring at it at the client in LA. We got people staring at things all over the place in multiple NOCs.
This will definitely be the challenge if that is a small team. So
It's not a small team, it's a big team.
that's good. You mentioned another challenge that you're facing and discussing a lot, and that is the shift from on-prem to cloud, and if that will happen for live or not. Do you want to comment on that, Michael?
Yeah, so I mean, that's a pretty contemporary topic right now. I think, so from a live/linear acquisition perspective, Ben, you might have better information, Pierre-Louis. I think we get about 3 channels to every 1 U of rack. 3 channels of program into 1 U. So do your own math. It's all going to the cloud. I believe that it's a generational thing, and I mean it truly generational. Like, the tolerance of younger software engineers and younger hardware engineers are going to be more tolerant of the cloud than older broadcast engineers who are getting into the streaming space, who want to see the red LED flashing to know that that thing is working. And I think that's another thing that happens at this trade show, is you watch the evolution of traditional broadcasters with their 4U going to a 2U device, going to a 1U device, to eventually going into the cloud or being software run. Now, you guys have huge investments in co-location and data center facilities. I see everything going to the cloud in X years. I don't feel like I'm an oracle of information when I say that, but I mean, are you seeing that as well? You have to be.
Well, we definitely see the transition. It's interestingly not going as fast as I would expected, and I agree with you with the generation. That's kind of a lot of these people running this broadcast workflow have been veterans of the industry, and they're still out there and making it possible. As part of the Lumen portfolio, we have a product called Vivix, which is acquisition of content, where basically we have deployments in most of the NFL, NBA, MLB stadium, for example, and we're just getting out the content out of the stadium or running it on a private network and usually sending it to a private data center. But we definitely see the transition. Now more and more, we definitely now supporting some more modern type of transport like SRT, which is going to cloud facilities. I think people still like the fact that we have like the hardware in the stadium and that it's really reliable and it's been a product. It's been, I mean, I'll still a testimony this morning for someone that said like, well, you saved my life a few times with Vivix product, because it is a very, very reliable product. But yeah, for sure, there's going to be probably slow transition. It's probably going to take another 5 to 10 years to be completely like internet-based into a cloud provider. But yeah, we're following that transition and we're making our product compatible with it. But it is definitely going there for sure.
Imran, any comments?
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we, being a startup, we built all our infrastructure literally over the past couple of years, and we had to look at every penny. So we watched the cost curves very carefully. And for us, we initially set out to build everything in the cloud because that was the architecture that we wanted to go with. But you know, for us, in our use case in particular, HEVC and advanced codecs, the cost curve wasn't there yet to make it affordable in the cloud for 24/7 encoding for live streams. Now that's changing, and very soon I think that we may hit that curve. But so we have a combination. We're hybrid in more ways than one, and so we've got a data center where we do a lot of our 24/7 live encoding. But we also do our packaging and encryption in the cloud. And we've got some encoding that we also do in the cloud as well. And so we appreciate the flexibility of being able to do both. And I do think at some point it will all move to the cloud. But for some of us, we're not there yet.
And how far in the future do you think you're fully in the cloud? Is it talking about next month or a couple of years away? Or
I could defer to my colleague Chase, who actually is in the crowd and runs that, but I would guess it's probably like a 3 to 5 year, maybe a little less.
Is that the other experience as well, or do you think it's longer? I usually think things like that as well, and then suddenly it's a couple of years more, or so.
I think, like I said, I think a generation of broadcast engineers have to retire out of the business, so 10 years. And that's not an indictment. I think that it's, I think that it's warming and comforting for me to see the hardware in the data center with reliable connectivity supplied by brands like Lumen in data centers that have backup power supplies versus a December of 2021 like Amazon had. And it's hard. I mean, they have hard work to do, and we have hard work to do. And you know how many subscribers would Hulu have lost if we had 3 outages of all of the linear service because we decided that we needed to save a couple bucks by moving our entire signal ingest into the cloud? High fives all around on the tech team, but that's not good for business. As things mature, we'll rely more heavily on the cloud. And you know, as I mentioned, 1 to 3 streams per U. And Hulu runs about 1,800 live streams, just to give you an idea of the magnitude of how many data centers, plus you got to run those redundantly. Yep. And it's taken us 10 years to really master this multi-CDN thing. We need another 10 years to master this multi-cloud thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think there's also a lot of sunk investment, right, that people are going to want to try and make as much use of as they can. So there'll be a purchase point at some point in the future where people will switch from on-prem to cloud, but it won't be immediately when the cost is cheaper. It'll lag that a bit.
There's going to be a hybrid transition, probably the most like premier type of live linear channel or events. It's going to stay longer in a kind of on-prem redundant dedicated, and we're already seeing some of the lower sensitive live going into the cloud, and I think that transition is going to keep on going until one point we all comfortable with.
Is that more a comfort thing, or is it a cost thing, or is it a bit of both? I think for Michael it sounds like a comfort thing to see the hardware and see the data centers, but you mentioned also, Imran, about the price curve. Is it the price thing still, or?
I mean, you know, price is always a funny thing because if a supplier wants, they can make a price 0, right? Like, you know, it's flexible. But I do think for us, it's both. It's experience and price. I also think it's individual to each company's situation, right? Our situation is a little bit different than some others. So I think for example, if you're doing MPEG-2, you could probably do it all in the cloud right now and be totally fine, right? And it would be cheaper. But if you're doing HEVC or an advanced codec, it might take a little longer for that to happen.
If I say to my finance people that price is flexible, I'm not sure they're going to be happy with that.
This is me as a product and engineer talking.
Yeah. If we look a bit into the future, and maybe not in the future, but unfortunately it is, because I think a lot of the live services on streaming today are very much mimicking the traditional linear TV viewing experience, very little personalization, very little interactivity. What's your take on that from this panel? Will we see more of the manning casts and choosing your camera angles, making your streams more personalized? Pick and choose your seat in the theater, watching a show. Will these things, of course, they will complicate the scenes even further and complicate the technical part. Will that come now, or will it not?
My take on that is that I think it has to bring real value, right? It's not just because you're bringing features to the user that they're going to start using it. And this is where we still need a testing. I mean, the whole metaverse type of experience has been very hype for the past few months. It's definitely something we haven't defined, right? What exactly it is to potentially watch something together in the metaverse. We don't really have any idea yet. We've been seeing some example, but like we talked about Group Watch, it is available. It's probably working for some content, not from some other content. I don't think we have yet figured that out. So I think bringing these interactivity features or like switching cameras. Like not everyone is really good at switching and can make a really good experience out of a concert of like a Formula One. I was talking with someone yesterday saying that they are working with like 60 camera on a Formula One now. So you got to have someone that is a master of camera switching to make it very nice to ingest, right? Because that's a lot of angle. So I think features we technologists are bringing features, but it has to be features that get the right adoption and that are very valuable for the end user. That's really my take there.
Michael, any?
Definitely. There's definitely going to be, we as consumers of entertainment are going to see some amazing things coming from the Disney brands as it pertains to the narrative. I mean, it's for all the technologists in the audience and all the challenges that we deal with. I've been really, really inspired by a lot of the content creators at Industrial Light and Magic, at Pixar. I mean, they're as good at their job as we are at our job, and they create some really, really, really inspirational and clever things. And now, it's a new opportunity for us to figure out how to present that to the consumers and to do it in a way that it commercially makes sense and it just makes longer engagement times and makes spending time on Disney a pleasure and not a labor. Like, it's entertainment. So I absolutely, absolutely know that there's going to be a future where there is more extra content being delivered to fanatics, people who love Star Wars and want to get more Mandalorian, more Boba Fett, more Obi-Wan. That stuff is going to be all available to them in the future. I'm excited for Marvel. I'm excited for Pixar. It's definitely going to happen. I could see it being done badly, and then rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. But I think in 10 years from now, we're going to look at Disney Plus as just like the BBC iPlayer from 10 years ago or 15 years ago, where we're like, wow, that's really innovative to see the BBC iPlayer delivering all the BBC content in a really slick web front end. And then Major League Baseball at bat. Well, that's a really slick way of delivering Major League Baseball to all of the baseball games. And then we're going to say, oh, Disney Plus launched. That was kind of cool. And then we're going to look at the next iteration of Disney Plus, where you're getting like all these Pixar characters, and you have your own avatar, and you have a whole Pixar experience. And then truly we'll start identifying what maybe the potential of a metaverse could be, a content metaverse.
I think it's really interesting, and it's, so for some of the folks who maybe have been doing this a while, you remember that the interactive example in TV was always you could buy Jennifer Aniston's sweater. And that's when Friends was actually live on TV. So you can date yourself by that reference. But I've worked on ATVEF, right? If anybody remembers ATVEF as the interactive TV format for broadcast TV. People have been trying to do this for a long time. So it's very easy to say, oh, it's failed, it hasn't worked, and all of these examples are, there's so many examples you can point to of things that people have tried and it didn't really catch on. I think it's easy to be cynical. My point is, though, that that's a normal part of the innovation cycle, right? You iterate and you iterate and you iterate. You try things and try things and try things, and then something works. And so let's not get disheartened by the first part of the innovation cycle, because I think we'll soon get to the point where we'll see something that catches, that works, and then people will say, how did we live without this? And I think that's where we're in between there right now in the innovation cycle of, if you want to call it interactive TV. I mean, you can also just look at what teenagers are doing, right? You look at TikTok, you look at some of the other things that I don't even know anymore. What kids are doing, there's some real innovation going on with video and entertainment that come in forms that you may not expect.
If you look at the music industry, we talk a lot about playlists, auto-generated playlists, Discovery Weekly playlists, and also celebrity playlists, these type of things that you're basically curating in your own channel or distributing that to friends and families and of the contents in there. Will that come to the TV as well, that you create a Michael channel and you can just send that to your friends that this is my Friday evening? That will put quite some challenge into the video pipeline supporting it.
Is that question for me, or is somebody else watching the Michael channel?
I was going to say, the Michael channel, if it's good, I'll watch it.
Because that'd be weird if you were watching the Michael. Maybe that's your whole point, is I could share the Michael channel with you, and you could. Yeah, I don't know. It's probably controversial to say that there's a possibility that we go as far as we've gone with this direct-to-consumer businesses, and then it turns into a build your own channel, sort of like back to the MVPD model, where you have these, $2.99 a month because I like, Disney Junior, and I like Tots, and I like Bunked, and you're building your own playlist. It's possible. I mean, if that's how people choose to consume their content, I think that there's a commercial model. The technology is not going to be the blocking factor there.
You might go as far as being the content adaptive to you, right? We've seen some experiments of that, but even like not only the channel, but like the movie you're watching or the episode you're watching is different from one person to another. That's even possible. Like, I think we're yet to see how the creative people can bring some crazy stuff, and we will be there to support them. I agree.
So what do you think, Imran? Will we have your playlist in your service, so I can select a few of the events I want to see in the evening, and I get that served to me as a playlist?
I think that's already there in some extent. You look at, there's some aggregation and curation experiences that a lot of people have been developing. Plex just announced theirs, and a few other companies have been doing that for a while, Google, et cetera. I think the key here is the experience part of it. Who makes it seamless, who makes it easy to use, and who makes it so that all of your content is integrated in one place. So we've started along that path where you can get your third party, your first party, your broadcast content from us and from other providers, your OTT content, your content from apps in one single EPG. Right? So we've got a linear service that shows you all of the live content you have access to. The next step there is, show me what I want, right? What I'm interested in, and that is, that's something we're working on for sure.
I think we're heading towards lunch, and people are starting to get hungry. But I thought we should round off with one final advice for the audience. If there are people in the audience that will start live streaming, or will expand on live streaming, or scale up live streaming, and with your experience, what would be your advice to the audience that will start live streaming? Maybe we start with you, Pierre-Louis.
Well, that's a big question. I think it's really, I would say, the preparation and defining what's your goal, right? What are you going to do? Which kind of users are you targeting? Obviously, you might not know day one, and you probably need to be on an iteration process like we all do. But the tool you're going to be using, the providers you're probably going to be picking, the cost that you're going to have, because this is not free, is going to be widely different. So I would say, like, try to define what you want to do, what kind of target, I don't know, what kind of devices, what kind of use cases, the scale, and that's going to help us to then, like, okay, fine tune the vendors, the architecture that you're going to be using. I think a lot of preparation is important in this when you're setting up live streaming workflows. Michael, any advice?
I think when it comes to live or linear, if you're in the business of content creation of live or linear, or VOD for that matter, I mean, my recommendation would be treat every single piece of content you create for streaming consumption as if it was your first and it could be your last. Take that stuff seriously, man, because if it breaks, if you fail at a live event, shut it down. Like, I mean, you don't get those 5 seconds back. It has not gotten easier in 20 years. Live events, if you have a 1-second outage on a live event, it shows up in a blog somewhere. It shows up on the internet, and you have to take every single event seriously. You have to check your list, check it again, test it again, have postmortems. I mean, you have to take it all very, very seriously. Don't take anything for granted.
Imran, you're rounding off this panel now with your final wisdom.
Wisdom might be overselling it, but what I would say is absolutely agree with what both Michael and Pierre-Louis have said, but don't use that as an excuse to not experiment, I think we're at a really interesting time where infrastructures are converging, where it's actually possible to try things out and experiment and see what works. And so while at the same time live streaming has to work, has to be flawless quality, I think you can experiment in the experience of it, right? In the user experience around live streaming and how people consume that content and experience the content in different ways. And I think that is really what I would leave people with is let's keep building new experiences.
With that, I think we have rounded off, and I want to thank the panelists. It's been a great hour, and I think it's been very educational. So thanks a lot for the. Thank you.
Thank you, Magnus, for hosting.
Thank you, guys.